All right.
We were at Baltil, we had like that stand.
Yeah, I'm not there yet. I'm not.
You want me to get you one? I'll get you one.
Finished. Okay. So, B'chlal, for those of you that don't listen to my podcast, which I'm assuming is most of you, I try every week to take an inyan in Tanya and to look at it with the Alter Rebbe sources. Because I feel like when you look at the sources and you take it apart, thank you. When you take apart the Alter Rebbe sources, you're able to get a deeper understanding of what the Alter Rebbe is referring to. And I think that there's such an inyan that's going on over here. I would have liked to prepare Mamash a source sheet. The rather, it's going to have to be a little bit balpeh. Maybe in future weeks we'll be able to do it a little bit more in person. So, what we have is on page 118 in Tanya. It's between Nun Tes and Samach, if anyone's using the after the Hebrew. So, the Alter Rebbe says, he's referring to the general thrust of what is, of avoda, that he's going for between, like, Prakim, Lamed Tes, a little bit iffy, but from Prakim Lamed Tes until Perek Mem Dalet, if I'm not mistaken. And then in Perek Mem Hey, he says there's another path for avoda, but as of right now, he's referring to a particular path in avoda. Now, this path in avoda, we're going to get into a little bit later, this path in avoda actually goes back to Meir and Nevuchim. And the Alter Rebbe is giving it as advice, practical advice for Beinanim, because in the entire thrust of Tanya, where we're at right now is that the Alter Rebbe established from Prakim Aleph through Lamed Dalet that there is such a concept of a Beinani. And now, from Prakim Lamed Hey through Nun Gimel, he's trying to explain what practically our Beinanim supposed to be doing. So, that's just a little bit of the map of where we are. So, in regards to the avoda of Parakim Aleph, the avoda that you're supposed to be thinking, firstly, you're supposed to start off with yirah. There is a concept of starting off with ahava, but it's yotzim and aklal. In general, we're supposed to start off with yirah tata, and then from yirah tata we go to ahava, and then ultimately you can get to yirah after a few levels of ahava in between. That's the general gist of what we're referring to. So now, on page 118, the Alter Rebbe says that Vashinis, another idea, and he says achas is that a person should be working on the body, that the body shouldn't be getting in the way of the Gilei Velikos. And we're going to also refer to that a little bit in the shiur B'ezras Hashem. Vashinis, he yigias hanefesh. And the second is the work of the soul. Shalei tichvad elaho avoda. That the avoda should not be so hard on it. Liagam machshavta lahamik lisbeinin b'glos avaya shal gdela or tufa. That a person should work on his thoughts to deepen and to contemplate the greatness of Hashem for a great hour, for a long great, for a straight amount of time. Because the amount of time in this hour is not shavah b'chol nefesh. It's not equal for every soul. Yesh nefesh zaka b'tiva. There are some souls that they are pure in their nature. That immediately when they contemplate the greatness of Hashem, it will immediately reach them the fear and pachad, I would translate it as panic, from Hashem. As it says in Shulchan Aruch, Yirah Chaim Siman Aleph, very halachic source over here. When a person contemplates that the King of all kings, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the great king, that the world is filled with his glory, stands over him, and he sees his actions, immediately the yirah will come to him. I want to pause over here to say what stood out to me over here when I learned this, is that it seems what the Alter Rebbe is saying is that there's a halach in Shulchan Aruch, not just tam halach in Shulchan Aruch, but pashan in the first sif, and it's not shavah l'chol nefesh. Literally in the phrase of shavah l'chol nefesh is mamish not shavah l'chol nefesh. There are some souls, there are some nefashes, and they're not shaykh to this. That the Ramah writes in Shulchan Aruch that if a person is mimik with this thought, or not necessarily mimik, if a person is misbeinin with this thought, that the King of all kings, the Melech al Kavod, is standing over him, immediately the yirah is going to reach him. This is the Alter Rebbe seemingly saying that this is only for Yechidei Skola. He continues, he says, you have some souls that they're lowly in their nature and in the way that they're created, from where they're hewn from, from the lower levels of the 10 spheres of Asiyah, and it's not able to find in a stock godliness, only with difficulty. And particularly if it was impurified with chatas norim, that sins cause a separation etc. That only with difficulty that a person strengthens themselves in their thoughts with Schultz. I don't know how to a good translation for emitz, but with a lot of effort and great depth, to deepen in the greatness of Hashem for a great hour. But certainly, at the very least, they'll reach them the yirah tata. So it seems like the Alter Rebbe is saying that there's two shlavim, that there's some people and they think about it and immediately they get it. They chap it. It's like Elisha said, "Chayavaya asher amadati lefanov." That a novi is he appreciates. He's standing for a king of all kings, a great king. He's experienced it in a vision, etc., or maybe not necessarily from a vision, but a person that just has a more refined nature, a more refined soul, and a more refined soul is able to actually think. That is actually able to appreciate when they just think, when they remember, there's Taka and Abish there. And it hits them right away. Some people, their neshama went through, as it explains in Parak Beis, that neshamas go through different levels of investment in the world. Some neshamas, they're created in Atzilus, and they're just put down here. That's the first kind of soul. Some neshamas, they go through level after level after level after level, and they keep on putting on these levushim. So a neshama that ultimately you're going to say its source is from one of these lower spheres, it's going to be very difficult for such a neshama to appreciate it. So I want to take a moment to focus on the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe didn't just write Tanya, he also wrote Shulchan Aruch. In his Shulchan Aruch, we're fortunate we actually have, technically speaking, 3 versions that the Alter Rebbe brings to the table in regards to how to approach this idea. The first one that I want to discuss is the Madura Basra. I think it's most similar to what's going on in Tanya. The second one is the Madura Kama. I think it's most similar to what maybe a natural expectation would be, and I think the Alter Rebbe actually gets to it in a couple of pages. And the last one is Piskei Siddur, which I think is most relevant for myself. As a brief introduction, I want to say that the very simple way to get out of this idea of the question that I posed, it seems to be that the Alter Rebbe is saying Shulchan Aruch is not Shav L'chol Nefesh, is that if you're Ma'ayin in the Ramah, even though it's not necessarily understood this way by the commentators, but you can at least understand it's possible the Ramah was referring to Tzaddikim, because he starts off in the phrase that the Alter Rebbe is quoting from. He says, this is a Ma'ila of Tzaddikim, the idea of Shvisi Hashem L'negli Samid. Now, the commentators like the Be'er Hativ, if I'm not mistaken, I need to make a source sheet for next time, but if I'm not mistaken, the Be'er Hativ does seem to understand that the Ramah, when he's saying that about this idea of his Beinus, he's referring to its own inyan. But you can read the Ramah as having one run-on idea, and that the Ramah is saying that part of the Ma'ila Tzaddikim of Shavisi Hashem L'negdi Samid is that you think about Mlech L'Aretz Kavodei, and immediately you get the yirah. You can read it in that way. We'll get back to that shortly, as Hashem. But that is ultimately the source, and I don't want to leave with the idea that maybe Shulchan Aruch is in Shav L'chol Nefesh. Shulchan Aruch is definitely Shav L'chol Nefesh. The Alter Rebbe, in his Madura Basra, is there one here by any chance, or? Yeah, there is. So I'll just grab it off. So the Alter Rebbe, in his Madura Basra, he says, immediately when you wake up from your sleep, you should think about who is sleeping in front of you. And Shanamar Melech L'Aretz Kavodei V'ilu HaYoshechu V'nei Melech Batzvar Dam Imidu Lav HaYimaschayev V'nafsheka V'chem V'nei Melech Malchem Lachem K'lesh Baruch Hu. This is what he says in Sif Dalet, essentially, that if you want to wake up early in the morning, the way to do it is think, the Eibush is here. Some people think they have a business meeting, and they need to make it to the business meeting. I remember once I was davening, and you have Machshav Zaris when you're davening. It was Punkt Shabbos Rish Chedesh. I remember because we said after that Shabbos, and I remember thinking when I got up to daven, I've been thinking about this whole meeting that I'm about to have, and Tachlis Geret is that I'm standing right now before Hashem. And it was, I think, maybe my first experience thinking, we're standing before Hashem. It's not just like Samazeh that you're davening and you say the words. It's no, it's the same way that you would think you have a big meeting, the biggest meeting that you could possibly have. That's what you're having with Hashem every day. attack it's every day, and it's very easy to fall into Mrs. Nashim Lamado, but this is what we need to contemplate. A great soul is able to think immediately, I'm standing before Hashem, and they get it. A soul like myself, you need to actually put some time and effort into it. However, I digress. This is Sif Dalet, this is the general advice. Then the Alter Rebbe continues in Sif. He says, essentially quoting from the Rama over here. He does also say he's quoting from the Ramam in Mir Nebuchim. So, it's not the same when a person is acting in their own house as they do when they're before a great king. And you don't speak the same way when you're with your friends as you do with a king. That's the full pasuk from that we quote in Parak Aleph. So immediately it will reach him. So it seems to be that the Alter Rebbe is going with the idea that he's expressing over here, that it would seem that he's going with the idea that everyone should be getting it. But he gives the caveat. He said, etc. I'm just going to skip for a moment. He says, and then if it doesn't reach him. So the Alter Rebbe is acknowledging that there's an idea that it might not reach him. If it doesn't reach him immediately, you should deepen in this idea very greatly until Itaka reaches you. I do want to point out, the Alter Rebbe brings this idea of Yamikarve until it reaches you from Rabbeinu Yonah. So it's not that the Alter Rebbe is coming and he's making a read in the Ramah, as in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is saying that some souls will reach immediately, and some souls it won't. The Alter Rebbe is not coming and making a chiddush necessarily in the Ramah. Rabbeinu Yonah is commenting on Mir Nevuchim. The source of the Ramah is ultimately Mir Nevuchim. So Rabbeinu Yonah is able to say, and then going back to the original source, this idea of the avoda, of how you're supposed to be relating to Hashem, goes back to Mir Nevuchim. And then it's been clearly written, and Klal Yisrael knows about it from Mir Nevuchim. Rabbeinu Yonah comes, and Rabbeinu Yonah says, not everyone is going to get it, but you can deepen in it. If you deepen in it, then you will be getting it at some point. The Alter Rebbe says another point, and this is again the third point that the Alter Rebbe makes over here. He says, "V'gam yoshev b'shuvah shlema." You should also do shuvah shlema. I'll call it for all of your averis. Shehim aminim me'gia alav yirah k'mei shekasov aveniseichem b'yim avdilim b'gana. And the averis are something that possibly can cause that the yirah will not reach a person, as it says that the averis are kaviyachol, a separation between the Yidden and Hashem. This is a quote also from Sefer Chassidim, the Alter Rebbe directly is to, and this is again the quote the Alter Rebbe is referring to in Tanya. So it does seem to be that the Alter Rebbe in Madura Basra is very much correlated to the Alter Rebbe in Tanya. It seems to be one for one. Now, to go to Madura Kamal, there's I don't know the exact circumstances behind it. I mean, there's a very short piece written at the beginning that they found the Alter Rebbe seems to be working on a second, more Kabbalistic version, maybe, of his Shulchan Aruch. However, ultimately, we only have 4 simanim of it. It's very fortunate that we have these 4 simanim. We'll take what we can get. Ultimately, though, the Alter Rebbe does also have a Madura Kama on these inyanim. And in the Madura Kama, the Alter Rebbe actually goes in a slightly different way, and then we're gonna flip the page and we're gonna look at how that also relates to the idea in Tanya and be medayik in his lashon to see how it all fits. V'chein Yakshiv, he talks about the idea of getting up when you're thinking about Melech Malchim Malchim Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's in Sif Aleph. He says, "V'chein Yakshiv v'chol asakav v'inyanov ki ein yeshivas ha'adam t'noisiv asakav v'levad v'vesei ki yeshivas v't'noisiv l'fnei Melech Gadol v'ein dibor v'achavas piv k'riteni v'hu man shivesi v'krevu ki dibor v'meshav Melech." This is again a quote from Mir Nevuchim, and we have that also in the Madura Basra. Kol shekin k'shiyasam adam al libay. And certainly when a person places into their heart, certainly when a person places it into their heart that the great king, the Melech Malchim Malchim Kodesh Baruch Hu, that the world is filled with his glory, is standing over him and seeing in his actions. As he says, and he quotes the beginning of the pasuk of that if a person will be hidden in hidden places, and will Hashem not see him, essentially that Hashem is taka everywhere. And so we need to appreciate that Hashem is everywhere. So, immediately will reach him the yirah and the achna from the pachad of the Creator, and he's going to be embarrassed from him constantly. Now, the Alter Rebbe over here seems to be going with, you would say, maybe a more berheita style approach to the Ramah that the Alter Rebbe is saying that it is miyad. However, there is a very notable difference. The Alter Rebbe has a golden lashon that many people extol him for, and the Alter Rebbe over here changes very slightly from the lashon of the Ramah. It's not a one-for-one quote from the Ramah, and it is also interesting to know, I was ma'arich on this idea in a different place, but it is also important to know that when the Alter Rebbe gives a source for this paragraph, he doesn't just source the Ramah, he also sources the Meir Nevuchim. And in general, the Alter Rebbe doesn't just give sources because he wants to show you that he knows how to read sources. The Ramah, actually, he quotes not just down the Ramah, he quotes the Darkei Moshe. Darkei Moshe explicitly says that his source is the Meir Nevuchim. It says in Meir Nevuchim. And so the Alter Rebbe could have just referred you to the Ramah, and if he would refer you to the Ramah, you would know that it's Meir Nevuchim, because if you read the Ramah, if you read the Darkei Moshe, not just down the Ramah, the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch doesn't explicitly mention Meir Nevuchim, but the Ramah in Darkei Moshe does explicitly refer to Meir Nevuchim. And so essentially the Alter Rebbe is saying Meir Nevuchim is nish stamazeh. And ultimately, the point is that the Alter Rebbe taka changes from the lashon of the Ramah a little bit, and you're able to get a very juicy part, and then we're going to go to Tanya in page 120. And the Alter Rebbe says, an analogous idea to what we've been discussing before. But v'hinei kol adam Yisrael, there's two dots. The line ends with v'hinei. That's the word. V'hinei kol adam Yisrael yiyah misha yiyah. Every Jewish person, be they who they may, when they contemplate this for a great amount of time every day, how Hashem literally fills the upper and the lower realms, and that the heavens and the earth literally are the whole world is filled with His honor. Mamish, literally. And Hashem is looking and He's checking the intestine, the kidneys and the heart, and everything that's going on with the person, all the actions and all the speech, and every step is being counted. Then it will break through in his heart the yirah for the entire day. When you go back and you think about this, even with that in every moment and in every hour there will be Sur Meirah and there will be Asitev. That a person should not Chas v'Shalom go against the honor of Hashem that fills the whole land. Like the Maimer that Rabbi Yechon Zaka said about Meir Shemaim. So this is what the Alter Rebbe says over here. It seems to be that there's two directions you could take the idea of why we're thinking about Parak Aleph, which is an idea that Rebbe encouraged to think about Parak Aleph. I should have maybe started off with that a lot of people think about Parak Aleph every day. There's one which is that taka for a person that's like what the Alter Rebbe is referring to, that a person who has a very refined soul, that they think about Parak Aleph and immediately they get the achno, immediately they get the yirah. There are people like that. Al pi pashtus, we're not necessarily like that. So the Alter Rebbe in his Mahadura Basra definitely fleshes it out. He says some people aren't like that. And to that end, he says, do tshuva. He says that you should think about it for more time. Ultimately, you'll end up getting it. There's another point, I think, that's to be brought out over here, which is that notwithstanding the source of our soul, we also have, I'm going to say almost a physical apparatus. The same way that an avera, that a person does averis, and the averis make the person fregret, and that they're not able to appreciate the yirah. The same way, if a person taka contemplates get v'chait enough, notwithstanding the source of their soul, they're going to become more in tune with spirituality. The Alter Rebbe says over here, he says that if a person puts it into their heart, he says that tibaka b'libay, it's going to break through in their heart. It doesn't say the soul is going to reach a higher spiritual state. He says it's going to break through in the heart. Also, in the Mahadura Kamo, the Alter Rebbe says that this is the exact thing that he changes from the Ramah. He says, "Kishiyasam adam alibe," when a person places it into their heart. The Ramah says "Kishiyisbainin," and Taka says "Bino liba v'alev mevin." It's Taka true, but there's a difference between something that your heart does and something that's actually in your heart. When a person contemplates this enough, it's not just that their lowly soul is every day going to be brought out a little bit more, until ultimately their soul is going to be on a higher level. Taka, a person stays wherever their soul is. Some people, their soul is taka not holding there. But a person can actually refine themselves. And this is a big theme that exists in Parak Lamed Zayin as part of the whole scheme. I don't know how much more time I have. I don't want to go over really.
But isn't one of the Shama sourced from Chiyuv Mimal, right?
Yeah.
So if it is, and there is a point. I guess you said earlier that there are levels where there are differentiators between the shamas, but at its very, very core, is there really a difference?
At its very core, there isn't. But we're not talking about the very core. We're not talking about a yid going on Mesiras Nefesh.
So the question, maybe he's referring to where at the very core, it can restore it back to.
Talking about nefesh, the level of nefesh.
So that's the Alter Rebbe says certain nefashos are taka and melubash in different levels.
Right.
If every neshama would be a neshama of Atzilos, I'm not going to say there wouldn't really be a chiddush, but also we wouldn't really be able to make a yirah tachtainim in the way that we possibly can.
Fine, but I'm saying, but in its core, maybe he's referring to the core. That's all.
No, it's a good point, but the point ultimately is that the Alter Rebbe says about the nefesh, there are certain nefashos that just it can't get through to them.
So the moment there's a differentiator, it can't be that.
It can't get through. As in, this is almost, if you would say, the avoda of the neshama, and it relates very much to the whole idea of what we're referring to, that every neshama has a certain, as in the scheme of things, that every neshama has its own place that it needs to be refining, and we all, also our bodies, we need to be refining. And taka, when a person, there's an idea of like neuroplasticity, that when you think about a certain concept enough, it can actually work its way into the channels in your brain. When a person contemplates enough, it's not going to be that the neshama gets a higher source. It's not going to be that the neshama breaks through the 10 spheres of Asiya and suddenly doesn't have that source. Ultimately, every neshama has a source, and that is the source of the neshama. We're all our own people. We're not here to become the Alter Rebbe. We're here to be ourselves. But we can taka, break through. As in, maybe you guys are all holding in the place with the higher neshama. You think about it in a second, and you get it. At least for myself, I know it's possible to break through. If you're mispeinin mishag dela, and you do it day in, and day out, but every day you're working on it a little bit more. Ultimately, you get to that point. You're able to break through. And I think that Alter Rebbe and his Ma'adur HaKamal, to him, it's not necessarily. It doesn't really matter if you have a tzaddik, and he's able to think about it and immediately he gets it, because that's not the point. If you want to be thorough, you want to talk about all the different levels, like he does in the Ma'adur Basra, you can. But as far as avoda b'poel goes, you have the idea that when you taka, place it into your heart, you taka, think about it, and it reaches you. Ultimately, after so many hours of working on it, so ultimately this is the avoda. This is part of what we're here for. And I think with Alter Rebbe, when he's referring to Beinanim in Sefer Shal Beinanim, I think this is more of the ikar. I mean, the Alter Rebbe does. I mean, continue on to this point that ultimately you think about it and you get there. Everyone is shaykh to getting there. That's ultimately the point. And I think that to that end, I don't know if they have Piskei Siddur in the back over here, but if they do, and Alter Rebbe we can look. But I think this one is. Oh, hold on. We might. I think we do have it, Taka. Yeah. So, the Alter Rebbe says, ultimately, and this is what the Alter Rebbe said, then he says, say Moeda'ani. That's basically what it is. And he says when you say Moeda'ani, when you remember Hashem, you'll immediately get up with zizus. And I think that ultimately this is maybe the third point, the third way of approaching Parak Aleph, just to go back and appreciate in bullet points the first two ways. The first way you could appreciate it is that depending on where your soul is holding, a great soul is going to think about Parak Aleph for a second and is going to get it, and not so a soul that's from a lower source, and I don't want to say it's not a great soul, but a soul that's not from such a high source is going to think about it for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and then maybe they'll get it. The second way you look at it is that it's an avoda to be built up, that every person, be they who they may, are ultimately able to think about Parak Aleph, about Melech Haaretz Kavod, and about Mamale and Seviv, and a person is able to break through their nature, it's able to get into their heart, and once it's in their heart, it's taka there. When they go back and they remember, like the Alter Rebbe says, it'll taka be there. The third way is ultimately, I think, avoda b'poel mamish. The main thing is, you taka get off in the morning. The main thing is, you think about it, and regardless is the hachnal mamish getting in, the Alter Rebbe says, a person says Moeda'ani, and they wake up with zizus. The Rebbe was very fond of Moeda'ani, he says the Pintel Yid. He has a whole elaboration on it in Kuntas Yinon Shal Teres Chassidus, and I think that ultimately it's a very darashvi inyan to say that regardless of where it's going to be putting me in my own avoda in regards to how I'm relating to Hashem, it's taka good and it's important. We learn Tanya, and it's not for nothing that we learn Tanya. But it's also important to bear in mind that avoda b'poel, that regardless of are we making progress, are we not making progress, does it touch our heart, does it not touch our heart, it's something that we need to think about. We think about it in the morning, and that should be enough to get us out of bed. Yeah, any questions?
You can see a Lepler. No, I think it was him that he wasn't shaykh, but he worked on it. Was it?
I believe so.
I'm
Do a
saying that's
picture.
a
Yeah,
illustration.
picture. Yeah, there's
Ready?
yeah, very nice.
First of many.
But just
No,
to,
that's
to illustrate your point.
Yeah, it's like a
The
good
Alter
example.
Rebbe had a chassid. He was a very simple thing. He wasn't
Last year I've noticed everybody
he wasn't
pointed out.
able to nothing. He was